Hello, everybody, and welcome to this panel with our wonderful longtime cast members. We could not do these events without Tom Nabbe because the first call is always, hey, Tom, who can you round up for us? And this time he's rounded up some really an interesting cast of characters, capital C cast. So I guess we should introduce them first.
Good idea, yeah.
Let's start with Disney legend Tom Nabbe.
Okay.
Who I think requires no real introduction. And you do know all their bios are in your program book, so we don't spend a lot of time on biographies. But Dr. Gloria Hardee, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Martin Smith, thanks for coming. Steve Baker. And for those of you who were at Living Seas last night, you got to meet Jim McCaskill, and we're thrilled to have him here today. So I would like to start with, well, Tom, you came from California. Anybody else on the stage come from California?
Yeah, Steve and I drove down at the same time.
You did?
Yeah.
That must have been a heck of a road trip.
Oh, yeah, it was. It's the first time I had been east of the Mississippi.
So what was it like coming to the swamps of Orlando at the time?
Quite a shock. It's quite a shock, but exciting. Very exciting. 21 years old, what do you expect?
21, huh?
Yeah.
There you go. God bless. So we're here looking at the preview center. This would have been the first materials that you had as they were building the Vacation Kingdom. Did it seem like they were going to be able to get it done when you got here? What month did you get here, I guess I should ask?
I got here part-time in January of '71, and then full-time in March.
And what did it look like in January of '71?
Skeleton on Main Street, elevator shafts for the Contemporary Hotel, and no water in Bay Lake.
What was your biggest concern?
Whether we were going to open on time, but Dick Nunes said we were, so I knew we were going to open on time. Orlando was very much a retirement community when we relocated here, and the retirement community wasn't real happy with all the new Disney people because the cost of living started to rise in the area, so it took a little while for us to get adjusted.
So were you here for that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you got here, there was no castle.
Some of the foundation castle forecourt was there, but no, none of the spires were in place yet.
So the first place I wanted to start on the stories here is, if you're looking at this, the headline in June is that they were seeking to hire 5,500 people. Now, obviously, guys like you and Steve were here already. But they're out there saying, oh, there's 5,500 job openings. And 2 months later in August, there's still 5,500 job openings. And I'm looking at it in August saying, well, goodness, like, how do you fill all those positions? And I know that was one of your jobs, was to hire people, yes?
Yes. Yeah, did a lot of interviewing where the crossroads is, where the retention pond now is where crossroads were. There were trailers there, and we would go interview the people of the trailers. And on a daily basis, I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Bob Woodham, who was the first monorail operator there. And if you go to the monorail panel tomorrow, Bruce Fox was one of the other people that I interviewed there.
I hope you're all going to be here tomorrow for that panel, too, like nobody's leaving on us. I pulled this up because in late August, you see the date there, August 29th, there's still 3,000 jobs to fill. You had 3,000 jobs to fill.
You got about 2,000 out in those trailers. Yeah. That's pretty good, Tom.
Well, the ratio used to be pretty good. But that slowly went down to about 1-to-1 on the hiring basis. But yeah, they had gigantic lines out in front, and the preview center was pretty much a interviewing area to Disney.
They went out there recruiting from around. I guess you had to deal with the population that was here, or anybody that moved here to work at Walt Disney World. I mean, that was pretty much your.
I grew up here.
You grew up here.
I grew up here.
And I'll let you tell this story now before we get to your pictures.
Well, I didn't get to meet Tom then.
Yes.
But I'm one of those people. Actually, I stepped on property in December 1970, putting two-way radios into construction vehicles. And that's when I saw Main Street for the first time, and I went, this is real. This is really happening. And it was a shock. Most Orlando people didn't think it was, they thought it was a traveling fair to begin with. But anyway, after a couple of months of doing that, I had an opportunity. A supervisor from Main Street said, you should go apply for a job. So I thought, okay, I will. In April, a Saturday morning, I got up, went out to apply for the job, got in line, and the first question, one of the people in line with me, and the line was about 2 hours long, they asked me, what are you auditioning for? Radio job, you know? And he says, well, yeah, everybody has to audition. So I went into myself and was just thinking, I don't sing, I don't dance. Why would a maintenance guy have to audition? I don't understand. It upset me so bad I got out of line. I went home, I went down the store, I bought a record from Disney, Whistle While You Work, and I learned it. The next morning, Sunday morning, I'm in line again. So I meet this young man who just wants a job in custodial or working with horses. And I said, what are you auditioning for? He said, what do you mean? I said, they told me yesterday you got to sing or dance or do something. He says, what are you doing? I'm dancing. I'm singing. He said, well, I can dance. I said, we'll do it together. We laughed and interacted the whole line. At the end, you go through a series of tests. And what we didn't know, and I didn't find out till years later from Gary Lawton, was that they had people watching, and if you could interact with other people, they wanted you to move. So after we filled out our application together, they moved us to the next line. We did an interview, they moved to the next line, and then we went in for a final interview, whether we got hired or not, and yes, we both got hired. But I was told that was what they were looking, because if you could interact with people and be friendly without being prompted to do so, that's what they wanted. They can train you to do everything else, but training you to talk to people they couldn't do. So that's how I got my job.
And you didn't have to sing and dance.
No, well, almost. Gary Lawton, when he heard I was going to audition, he said, well, what'd you do? I said, went home last night and learned a song. He said, you ready to sing? I said, now? He says, yeah. So he brought staff into his office. I said, okay, Jim, they were laughing so hard I knew it was a gag then. And I said, I'm not doing it. Every year on my anniversary, I'd call Gary Lawton and said, thank you for the job. He hired me in as the very first electronics trainee at Walt Disney World. And I'd call him on my anniversary and say, thanks for the job. He said, you ready to sing? No. And, you know, all these years, I still haven't sung. So there you go.
So we get to, this is the Eyes and Ears that was put out on opening day in October 1971. What was it like?
Well, first of all, we had fog that morning, okay, which I don't remember reading any of the weather reports about fog. And I got to the Magic, actually, Ticket and Transportation Center monorail station, and the fog stopped at the ticket gates. And so you couldn't see how many people were out there. Okay, and we opened, and we were all in different colored jackets, so Dick Nunes could figure out who was in charge, I think is the reason being. And they opened up the gates, and the people came in, and all of a sudden the fog lifted, and there wasn't anybody else at the gate. We sort of got everybody in that first 15, 20 minutes that morning. Now, that changed as we went down along the line. So, but that was opening day.
So a quiet time in the parking lots and the trams there, Steve, because that's what you opened on opening day.
Well, the first day was quiet, and I was thoroughly depressed and thought, what happened? It's a failure. I'm going back to California. And we said 8,000, 8,000 came. I'm sure it was 6. But very quickly after that first day, it started picking up, and I have a a cute story to tell you about one of the guys. The first day, maybe a day or two later after the first, we filled the parking lot. And so at about 11 o'clock, I had to cone it off, but we had a line all the way out to almost I-4 of cars. So we had to figure out how to bring them in, turn them around, send them out. So they had to come in. And one guy got out of the car, and Pete Crimmings, I don't know if anybody remembers Pete, but he was a wonderful guy, and he had throat cancer early on and couldn't talk real well. And so this guy gets out of the car, and Pete goes and starts hitting him in the chest. I came all the way from Ohio, and I'm not going home without my kids. Pete goes, "Sir, come back at 3, you'll get in. I promise." The guy goes, "I won't come back at 3. He's hitting him on the chest. He's hitting him on the chest. And the guy won't listen to the thing. He's arguing with Pete the best Pete can. And I'm standing over to his right. And Pete leans over, grabs me by the shoulders, puts me in front of me, and goes, "Here, you tell the son of a bitch."
The Disney difference.
Yeah, it was a special guy. But
Yeah.
after that, we were busy. And yeah.
Fantastic. What do you remember about the dedication weekend in Roy?
Oh, I just remember, being in the parking lot. We had to be out there at first and then come on in. It was just, very special. I met Roy and I talked to Roy a couple times and just in passing, but I just thought it was terrific, and we did it. We did it as far as all the guests were concerned. There was a lot of, things we had to still do, but we pulled it off, and the rest is history, I suppose. But it was, I'd been to several when I was at Disneyland, California, and several events, and Walt was always there, well, up until 60s, December. He was there, and management was always there, and they were special, and this was special too.
I managed to meet Roy when we were in the warehouse ticketing merchandise, and he was coming through doing a tour. And so I went over and waited till he stopped talking, and I introduced myself and just thanked him for coming out and opening up the park and everything. Then I went back to our table where we were ticketing, and everyone wanted to shake the hand that shook the hand of Roy Disney.
Have you washed it since?
No. It shows.
Tom, can you tell us about this picture?
That's at the monorail shop in the North Service area, and we're getting ready to go out and do some filming, pre-opening filming on the track. We only had one monorail that was operating at the time, so almost all the opening shots that you see with the monorail close up and that type, I'm driving the train. And I remember watching the photographer, and there was one time that he goes like this because I got so close to the work tractor, I almost kissed him.
How did you get Brian Wilson to be the cameraman there? All right. Jim McCaskill. So I told Jim this picture on the top right there holding Nixon and Kennedy has circulated on the web for as long as I've been doing the Disney social media thing. And I had no idea it was him until he sent me pictures to include in the presentation today. So Jim, tell us how you started here.
Well, as I said, I was an electronics technician trainee, an apprentice program. And that's me with the one-inch bend loops, which are the machines that provide audio and the click track for the computers to run Bear Band, Hall of Presidents, and all that. And they were all down at DAX Central. And that picture of me and the presidents came from the animation shop, and it was done because I was asked, as part of I was going to school at night, and I was asked to do a presentation about my job. And at that time, everything in the tunnels, everything behind the scenes was secret. We weren't allowed to take pictures. I had to elevate this up pretty high to get approval to do this slideshow about my job. And that's one of the pictures we took just for excitement. And it was exciting. That one presentation led to probably right around, actually, it was about 1,400 presentations of high schools and elementary schools and other colleges in the area. They kept getting calls, can that slideshow come to our place? So here I was a trainee, but I was doing more slideshow stuff, trying to promote Disney and promote what audio animatronics was all about, because it's a word most people had not heard in Florida. So that's where it is.
That's where it is. Steve, I already asked you about the parking lots, but that was my parking lot slide for you to show you the opening month parking ticket and the opening month parking images.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add there, Tom, since that was all your domain?
Well, that's Steve's domain, but one of the things that when we opened up, I was supposed to have 6 monorails. I had 3.5. Okay, we had X number of trams, but they had problems and they kept breaking down. So about 4 o'clock every afternoon, the transportation supervisors would meet with the duty manager and try to figure out what the in-park attendance was. Okay, and then we figure out how many monorails we had operating and how many trams we had operating and how many boats we had operating, and figured out the theoretical capacity to get the park empty. Okay, and that would be right around 4 o'clock. That's when the exit starts. And we'd figure out it'd take us about 3.5 hours to get the people out of the park. So there would be an announcement, for your convenience, the Magic Kingdom's going to stay open for another hour and a half, okay? Because that's how long it was going to take us to get the people out. A typical day was you came in the morning, you went to Ticket Transportation Center, you worked audience crowd control for 3 hours, you went to your office, did your paperwork, then you went to the Magic Kingdom monorail station and you did crowd control until the park was clear. And we did that every day, 7 days a week until Christmas.
I'm sure it was rewarding work.
Notice the price.
Yes.
The parking lot price.
Oh yeah, 50 cents.
50 cents.
It's still 50 cents. You just have to stack it on top of each other again and again and again and again.
Disneyland was 25. So.
Well, it's Florida inflation right there. You
there it
got to
goes.
pay for that Bay Lake somehow.
Now, you got to park for free yesterday.
I did.
Tell
I
that
talked
quick
my
story.
way in.
Yeah, he sweet talked his way in. And what'd you
Well,
say?
I thought you guys were picking up my paycheck there, and they said no. So she said, what are you doing? I told her what we were doing, and she said, oh, you're an original cast member? And I said, yes. Come on in.
There you go.
So that's the trick right there, everybody. Just say.
I'm going to get a sign that says original cast member and just start wearing it anytime I'm in the area.
He joked, he showed us one of his original IDs, and we were like, you should have pulled that out. That would have really got you right in.
Yeah, I still have that.
So we're going to hop around a bit here, but there are some stories I want to ask about the Epcot groundbreaking and grand opening, and you're still on, Jim. Tell us about the balloon.
Well, the Epcot area they couldn't ground break. They had to do filling, as that's why they used the big dump truck to dump dirt, because we were going to add dirt there. But about several weeks out before this ceremony was to take place, entertainment came to me. I was one of the 2 only balloon pilots on Disney property that we know of. And so they came to me and they said, you have friends? I said, well, a few. In ballooning? Yeah, a couple. They said, can you get 5 or 6 balloons together? We would like to showcase the pavilions, and we're going to have the press all up at the front, and they won't be able to see the balloon where the pavilions are unless we raise a balloon in that area. So I got my friends to come and help me. So yeah, about 2 weeks before, we had a hurricane come through, filled up more water. That's why all the mud's on the side of the picture. And so those balloons are representing. Mine was the balloon with the yellow stripe, and that was at the Imagination Pavilion. And then my favorite shot is the one that's in the trees, the red, white, and blue. That's the American Adventure. And that's what the site looked like. But down close underneath the green, it was all water. And they had to do a lot. But that was a fabulous day. And my friends who were not Disney employees, we gave them all tickets for to go to Disney World with their family. And they did that for that price.
That's great.
It was fun.
So, for those of you who don't know, the Concorde was a supersonic jet that started flying in the 1970s until the early 2000s and used to cross the Atlantic in like 2.5 hours. In fact, at dinner, was it last night or the night before, some of the guys who worked on Disneyland Paris were talking about flying it over there and how it was a much faster flight than the 10 hours from LA that would normally take in a jumbo jet. And so we scanned slides. We have about 20,000 slides that we've scanned, and we found this one from what we later learned was October 18th, 1982. And I didn't notice it the first time, and I looked, I said, I think that's an airplane going overhead. And then I zoomed in more, and I said, that's the Concorde. And while we knew about the dual landings of the Concordes to open Epcot for this ceremony, I didn't know that they circled Disney property on their way in, and by zooming in, I can also tell that that's the British Airways concourse. British Airways and Air France flew them both. So, Steve, you were the guy that coordinated that. How did that happen?
I did, actually. Well, it's interesting. Kind of one of those unplanned events. I was at a cocktail party at the top of at the Contemporary Hotel with Dick Nunes and a couple participants that were going to be in Future World. And Dick's up there talking, and he's talking about the future opening of Epcot. And he looks over, he says, you know what I've always dreamed? I want the Concordes to land here for the opening of Epcot. And he says, Steve, that's a great idea. Can you make it happen? I want to see the British and the German Concordes land for Epcot opening. And I said, well, I can try the German, I can try the British, but I can't do the German. There wasn't one. It was British and France. So we spent about yeah, well, that was Dick. You had to know him to love him. And it took about 10 months, and Dave Pritchett, who worked in my office with me, he kind of went after him, and it was a big success. Actually, we brought participants from the UK and France, and their guests, they got to come over on the Concorde. So it was special to them, and of course special to us. And got a couple things. Both pilots said to us, "You guys have first-class tickets. Anytime you want to trade them in and come over to Europe, we'll take you on the Concorde." Well, great. So I've been on it 3 times actually. So, but it's about a 3-hour and 10-minute ride. So only a dinner. It's got windows about that big. There's usually some very interesting people on it. Unfortunately, it didn't last long, but it was quite a deal. And one thing they did, the pilots got together and they decided to see how fast they could get home. And so they broke the record for both Concordes on going back to Europe from Epcot, from Orlando. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Martin.
Yes, sir.
It's your moment, and the question I have to ask, since your background was in merchandising for all those years, did people really buy cuckoo clocks and bunches of flowers and tea sets and things on Main Street, USA?
Yes, they did. And we're eternally grateful for it. But yes, so we started out with the clock shop and Elgin watches in the corner of the Emporium, and the flower section out on Center Street, which is now part of the Emporium. But people would buy them. We had flowers also back in Pirates. We had a flower bazaar there, and people would buy them. And might seem crazy that you'd come to Disney to buy plastic flowers, but people did. But the biggest thing that they loved was the character merchandise. That was the highlight for them. And even the girls down here below that would do the sewing on the hats and personalize it for you, all of that went very well for us. It was awesome.
So we can't talk about merchandise without talking about the merchandising bonanza that came with the best theme park, and that's the Epcot Center merchandise.
Right.
And we can't talk about the Epcot Center merchandise without talking about the greatest department store ever to exist in a theme park, and that is the Centorium.
Yeah. It was almost the greatest department store to ever exist that you didn't know was there.
Yeah.
Because it set back and it was not on the direct path when you were coming in. And then when they extended it and brought out the glass casing on the outside where people could look in and see it, it started getting flooded. And initially at Epcot, they didn't have Mickey Mouse merchandise in there for us. And then the demand was so strong that we had to go back and put it in and load up the store. And so the glass windows on the outside of Mouse Gear all were characters. So when people saw that, they flew into it, and it worked very well for us. It initially had an upstairs shopping section also with an elevator that would take you up. It did not, over time, it did not draw the crowd that we would have liked, and so now it's just offices up there. But the store is a killer store and does a great job.
Everything about Centorium just exuded class, and I'm hoping on the big screen up there you can see the top left picture just as you check it out. I mean, shirts and ties and, you know, brass items and classy hats and a spoon collection, because who doesn't need little souvenir spoons? I mean, everything about it was great. The crystal, it was like going into a sharper image, the advanced electronics that they sold and things like that. And I know Hal Bowers is out there somewhere who told us he used to play with Atari computers on the second floor, right? So great there, but you were the lead for opening the shops of Disney-MGM Studios.
Yes, sir.
So what was it like to build a park from scratch?
It was a lot of fun. You came on, and Hollywood Studios, the streets are a little bit narrower because the park was going to be viewed as a 6-hour park. And it was tied out to Epcot. The thought process was that people would come to the studios, then they'd go over to Epcot afterwards. Even the stores were rekeyed on a submaster of Epcot's keys. And so everything was done in conjunction with that. But we started it out, and you had to do the same thing. You had to figure out where you were getting personnel from. So you were doing interviews for cast members to come over and setting someone up to do the warehousing and bringing in the merchandise and bringing in the products, setting it up. And slowly, because you're working with experienced people this time as opposed to brand new people initially, you had folks who kind of knew what they had to do and they were able to jump in and do it. And it was more of a team quickly because everyone knew their process and their role. So it worked out very well for us. And the dark room, that's probably one of the last camera centers you'll ever see, because today everyone's got it on their phone. No one's saying, hey, remember we got to go buy film before we get there. Everyone's got it on their phone and they move forward from there.
The studios has some of the great signs, especially all the neon that they utilize there and the different designs around it. But I can't talk about merchandise at the studios without asking you about Sid Cahenga's and the beautiful collection of Hollywood memorabilia that used to be in there.
Right. We had a buyer who would go out and source all this product, and we had the good fortune of having cast members who had an avid interest in this product. And so they learned about it along with the buyer who'd come in and talk about the pieces, what'd we get, how'd we get it, and all of that. And they could relay that on to the guest and make them aware of what they were purchasing and whether it was a great value to them or not. But most folks came in looking for the person that they had an interest in from Hollywood. And so that made it easier on you, and the cast members working in there usually knew where everything was placed, or if they didn't have it out front, did they have it in back, and they'd bring it in for us. And then Sid Cahenga's was also the backdrop for where the first family stood in front of it when we did the first family picture at the studio.
So the very first shoppers that wanted a Bob Hope autograph could go there. Dr. Hardee, it's your moment. It's your moment. Tell us about your start with Walt Disney World and some of the cool stuff you got to do.
Yep. Grand Prix. It was probably my most favorite attraction to work at in all 4 parks. And the reason for it, it was so physical, it was fun, the guests were having a blast. But I did start in Mission to Mars, so I talked to Mr. Johnson all day long. He's my favorite. And I worked all 4 parks in attractions and custodial. I also had some time in entertainment, costuming, cosmetology, ticketing, a little bit of guest relations, and then I moved into training and development, working with the human resources. So I kind of moved all around wherever I was needed.
Very diverse, in fact. We have you, I know you were at the City Hall, right? Yeah.
Guest relations for a bit in the Magic Kingdom, and that bottom left, Splash Mountain kind of was announced, but there was a decision that as a park, we were not going to do a groundbreaking. And my whole team in Frontierland, Liberty Square area, they were like, we have to have a groundbreaking. So this was our groundbreaking that we came up with. Gloria had a shovel and she dug in some dirt, and we did our own groundbreaking. So that's a picture from that day.
I have a question. What's the most memorable thing that happened while you were working on the Grand Prix?
Grand Prix? Most memorable? It was very dangerous.
Like, it seems like there's a lot to go wrong, and you're there. There's fumes, there's gas, there's oil,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot there that could. And I'm amazed it's still open, honestly. But it seems like there's a lot going on there that could potentially impact a lot of guest stays.
Yes. One of the cool things was, way back in my day, you actually hopped onto the side. If any of you remember, a cast member jumping onto the side of your car
Little pedals
and
there.
bringing it on up what we called the line. And at the time when I was there, we had a person in the tower. And think about Speedway or like Daytona. So whenever the beginning of the race happens, it's drivers, green light to go. So it was drivers, and we had 6 lines. So drivers, row 1, green light to go. So you had a person actually dispatching those cars. So if you were on the line, you were telling the guests to get going once their line was called. So they were actually racing throughout that time. But we eventually took that part out, and we didn't allow for cast members later on to be hopping onto the side of the cars. But that was fun. That was a lot of fun.
Did you ever figure out how to make them go faster?
You couldn't touch the governors.
I was curious. Yeah.
They were all set to be at a certain speed, and it was quite wild if one of the governors broke and you saw this car just flying. The guests loved it. Yeah,
So
those are memories.
when we were lining the panel up, as Tom was telling me about each guest that had agreed to appear, when he was singing your praises, he was singing your praises about Disney University. So tell us about Disney University.
I made a huge jump. After we opened opened Animal Kingdom, I moved around to a couple of other areas, but within Animal Kingdom, I started working in training and development. So I always had a passion for training and making sure that the new cast members that were brought on were trained well, but also all of the trainers. That was always my key to any operation, was that the trainers were your most important asset out there. So I really enjoyed the development piece. And so I was part of the training team at the Animal Kingdom, and then later I took on a role at the Disney University overseeing training and development for attractions, custodial, guest relations across the world. And that was for the line of business team. And I worked there for a couple of years before I moved into college program, because that was, again, my background was the training and development, and I went over to college program for the last 10 years of my career.
So we were fortunate to acquire one of the slide sets from the Disney University seminars, Service Disney Style, which without the narration, you can just make it up yourself, which would be fun some night on a movie night to just run through the whole thing and make up our own narration for it. But the great attraction for it isn't the screens like this, it's that it had purpose shot photography for the slideshow that they were doing. And there are gems like this where, you know, whatever they're talking about to the crowd, I'm looking at it and saying, okay, so they're asking a cast member in front of World Key for instructions, and some photographer framed it and said, oh, dear God, they needed to be eating ice cream. And every member of the family has to run out, and somebody's running to the nearest ice cream cart to shoot this and get ice cream in there. I did want to talk a little bit about corporate partners at Epcot, because I know some of you had relationships with them. It was featured, this is an article from 1981, I think it is, or 83, I can't see. But it's about the corporate partners and Kodak being, which is funny because Kodak had no relationship with them the first 10 years until they opened Epcot. But everybody, like you say, corporate partner, and that's who you think of as Kodak. But it talked about them expecting that the sales in the Disney complex rose 30% their first year that they were involved. Steve, you had some role in the relations with the corporate sponsors, and I know you did too, Jim.
When I was director of participant affairs, that was our job. And I took the job in 1980, when it was just beginning, and most of the corporate sponsors in future were identified but not developed yet. So I got to be involved in the development of all of those in some form, and then the World Showcase was wide open. And I probably had the best job in the world. I got on a plane and went to every country you can imagine selling Epcot. And we did it we did it up until, because we still wanted an African pavilion. So we did it up until 80, I left in 90, but we were still working on participants, and we were still trying to fill all the spots in World Showcase. It was terrific, it really was. And I would never changed it for anything. I mean, I've got 4 million miles just on Delta Airlines. I got a couple wives though, but that's so that's the problem. But so yeah, it was fun. I got to know personally all the different corporate officers of all those companies. Still friends with the Norwegians, and I'm still friends with a lot of the corporate guys were older than I was, so they've dearly departed. But it had a lot of benefits. It really was an eye-opener to travel the world and represent Disney, which was not hard. It was door wide open for Disney executives. So I got a million stories, so I won't take all the time, but I could talk all day about it.
Jim, can you tell us about corporate lounges and the role they played? And your relationship with them.
And he and I could talk 2 days about it.
Yes.
And we talk too much sometimes. In fact, the first time I met Steve, we were on the Mickey Mouse One coming back from California. I was doing engineering for Epcot. Mm-hmm. And his daughter, I believe your daughter was with you, and my son at the time.
Probably,
so we got to ride there.
Yeah.
At the end of my career in engineering, one of the last pavilions I worked on was the Living Seas. And during that time, and I think you may have heard earlier, budgets started changing, and my department was shrinking. And United Technologies asked me if I'd like to come over and be an assistant manager. And I said, I'm the chief of electronics engineering for Walt Disney World. And they went, we'll pay more. I thought, maybe. And then they said, you'll play more golf than you've ever played. I said, you got me there. So I ended up transitioning over to be assistant manager of the Living Seas. That's where I met my wife 40 years ago. And the lounges were set up for us to have a place that the employees of those companies, there's a lot of money, and he was able to get so much money out of these participants to help build the attraction so we could build the best. And the Living Seas, Harry Gray was the head of that, CEO. He wanted this pavilion to be fantastic. I mean, at first he didn't want this. He wanted a space pavilion, but he was talked into this. So that's the Living Seas pavilion, and we did a lot of events and corporate training and sponsorship programs going on. And I also worked after that. Corporate chairmen are very good friends at times, and the UTC was very good friends with John Creedon, who was a chairman of MetLife, and they talked MetLife into coming and talking to Steve about the Wonders Life Pavilion. And then they loaned me to MetLife to help them develop the facility. So I then transferred over and became a MetLife employee running that lounge. And it's one of the best jobs I ever had.
Yeah.
And that's hard to say because my Disney career was so fantastic. But this lounge was a health fairground. And we had so many great people coming in there and working with us. And I think you've got some pictures of the lounge up. And it was designed as a health fairground. And it was fun. It was just fun. And so many great people were coming in.
Yep.
But
So last night you gave us a little peek there. It's not a great picture of it here, but the balloon in the bottom left picture, the orange and yellow balloon.
that was my second balloon. Yeah, I had a second balloon, and they had an artist come in. The chairman wanted that health fairground to come into the first floor, which is where our employees would come through to be backdoored onto Body Wars. And so when they were coming in, they wanted it very relaxed. And originally, one of the funny stories is that all the cushions on those seats, they would stay longer than we expected, so the room kept filling up. So we took the cushions away, so they got tired of sitting there after about 10 minutes, and they'd go on in the ride.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my balloon. The artist that was doing all the mural work in the pavilion was not getting the balloons right. And so I brought pictures in of my balloons that said, this is how the lines come down to the basket. They're hot air, that means it's flames. And so they started changing. Next thing I know, my balloon's in the artwork, so I was thrilled about that. But yeah, that's a great pavilion. And then after Wonders, I moved over to Kodak for a little while, and then I went to Siemens. And in other words, I was hopping through corporations, but I helped each one of them develop what their story was and manage it. And again, as Steve was saying, Participant Affairs really worked close with them to make sure the imaging was right. At Siemens, that was probably the most fun of getting out and doing something different because we did things like also sponsored Illuminations, which to me is one of the greatest shows they've ever done.
Yeah, let's talk about that one.
So we got to showcase a private viewing area. So if we had a conference in, we would take them out we wanted them to go out and see that, so we were out there quite a bit. But the Siemens was a technical challenge, and we had a lot of fun putting that together.
Out of all the companies and corporations and countries, which was the most challenging? Is there one that presented a unique something?
For me personally, it was the MetLife Pavilion. And the reason that, for me, is that way because I started when it was dirt. And, coming up out of the ground and what had to happen, there was a lot of coordination going on with Disney. And fortunately, with my background in engineering at Disney, we got along. And so Disney would go, you can't do that. I'd go back to the corporate people. Now, they believed Disney, but they didn't believe Disney. What do you mean we can't do that? And I'd say, no, you can't do that. So there were certain things you can and can't do, and having the background that I had allowed them to understand and accept it much more. But the MetLife Pavilion coming out of the ground, it was a monster. And working on the VIP lounge as well as coordinating what was going on with the shows, a lot of fun. A lot of fun there. So that was probably my most challenging one, just because of the amount of hours that was spent there trying to get it done. Yeah.
So some of you might be able to tell, this was my second visit to the Siemens Lounge. Down the bottom, I'm Inception there. I'm in the center. So I got to visit that lounge twice when you were running it, Jim, although I didn't know that you were running it then.
I didn't know you were there.
Yeah, I know. But you probably had it on a list. But my friend did a lot of business with Siemens, so they got an arrangement to get in. I had been in the year before in Epcot 35. They had the VIP event there. So I was fortunate enough to get a ticket, and I met my now old friend Tony Baxter for the first time that night. And if you look down the end of that Billie Jean hallway, you'll see the guy in the red shirt there is Tom Nabbe. So that was the first day we met, too. We just didn't know it.
I'm sorry,
I said that's the first time we met there.
You're in that picture right there,
2012. You're in the red shirt at the end of that lighted hallway.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Oh,
He'll
okay,
take
I
my
see me
word for it.
all the way in the
Tom, I remember you being there.
So before we wrap up, I want to give an opportunity to talk about three guys that we never had the chance to interview. We were supposed to have Sully, if you remember, at the two events ago, and he wasn't feeling well that day. And try as we might to get Dick Nunes, we never did. And we didn't start doing this, shortly after we started doing this, Bob Matheson, he was already living in the Carolinas, but he passed away. So since you all worked with him, I wanted to give you an opportunity to say something about any or all of them.
Well, all three of them are my mentors. You'll see them in the foreword of my book, that type thing. Bob Matheson gave me a challenge many years ago of basically, Tom, Walt hired you. You're Tom Sawyer, and you need to share your story. And that's why I come and do these things and share my heritage out there. And I thank RetroMagic for inviting me.
You want me, Tom?
I agree. I agree with Tom. Those are the three. When I think of Disney, I think of those guys. I got to know Sully in California, and he was. I think Sully's responsible for my management style, which is. I don't want to. It's loose. Let's put it that way. And because I felt that, the company is the happiest place on earth. So keep it that way. And make sure, if anybody stepped out of line, you step out of line, you fix it. But if they, I don't need to get into it. But I had a world of respect for Sully. Actually was a neighbor. And then I didn't know Bob in California. And, but when I got to know him here, of course, he was just Mr. Steady, he had terrific morals, he had terrific credibility, he was just an honest, always the same, he was steady as he could be, and you knew that you didn't want to make him mad, and you didn't want to disappoint him. I got to know Dick real well. I actually did a lot of traveling with Dick. Went to Paris and Norway, and I can't remember the others, but spent a lot of time with him. And he's a classic, interesting guy, dearly departed, but he was also fair. I mean, he'd tear you apart, but he thought he was right, so he was fair.
He was right.
He was right. Oh yeah, he was. Right. You were right, Dick. I finally realized it, but no, we wouldn't have had the company here in Florida that we did if Dick wasn't here. We wouldn't have had it. It would have been a totally different, good or bad. You have your own opinion. I say good, because he would never ask you to do anything he wouldn't do himself, and I respected that. So, you picked three excellent people.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Anybody have anything else before we move on?
I will say same thing. All three of them were fantastic people, and I enjoyed working with them. And I've been dressed down by all three of them at one time or another.
You probably deserved it.
Especially during that. Yeah, I did deserve it because we weren't getting systems online. But I'll tell you, with Dick Nunes, and I've told different stories about him, but one of them was the opening day of Magic Kingdom. There was a cast picture out in front of the castle. And I was an apprentice electronics tech, and there was no other technicians there. And he was given the microphone because he wanted to talk to the cast about what the day was going to be like. And just as he started to talk, the mic went dead. And all my bosses all looked at me like, can you fix this? I ran up the ladder into the gazebo, and I just started touching wires, and all of a sudden I heard Dick talking again. I went, oh, I did something. All right, go back down. And he's over there doing this, right? And he's telling the cast, he said, today you're going to have problems. Fix them like he just did and move on. But just keep moving.
Yeah. All right. Martin?
Yeah. I was going to say, Dick was the absolute leader. That was from my point of view. But what's interesting was that Bob had Dick's back solidly. Oh, yeah. And Sully had Bob's back solidly. And those guys could depend on each other on doing the job. And Bob, I always thought, was Mr. Detail. Right before we opened the studio, he was coming in the front of the park one morning, and I had park duty. I'm walking to the front to check it. And he walks by, morning Martin, morning Bob. And I kept going, and all of a sudden I said, he is right behind me. And I turned around, and he was right there. You the duty manager? Yes, sir. Why is that platform between Sid Coang or between Crossroads and Mickey's. I have no idea, Bob. Are you the duty manager? Yes, sir.
Find out.
Why is that platform sitting there? I thought, dear Lord. So Phil Holmes was at the front, and I went up to Phil, and I said, Phil, I got Bob on my butt. I should have looked behind me, but I didn't. And I said, he wants to know about the platform here. And Phil said, no idea. I said, you're a big help, Phil. But he got on the radio and called and walked over to Bob and said, no one knows, Bob. He said, okay, we open in 10 minutes. All the flowers, get out of here. I want the platform gone. And right at that time, a guy from Germany who was going to be the head of security for Disney and at Euro came up, and Bob said, let's get these plants out of here. So this guy immediately grabbed one, and not knowing how we did things, dumped a gallon of water into his left shoe. And I carefully drained mine off and moved it away. And then a guy walked up and said, whoa, what are you doing? Bob said, do you know why this is here? He said, yeah, First Family stands there for the picture tomorrow. And Bob said, get those plants back out here and put them around. And so he walked off with the security guy, and I kind of chuckled to myself because I saw a wet left foot going down Hollywood Boulevard.
Thank you for those stories. These are the people that did it, so we thank them for coming. But before we leave the stage, there is a Retro WDW special presentation. So if I could ask Todd McCartney and Hal Bowers, if he's over there, to join us up on stage. It's a very, very brief. Do you have a mic, Hal, or Todd? Or?
I have a mic. Yep.
Okay.
That's
There you are. Hi.
Yep. And Hal's coming around that side there.
Oh, Hal's coming this side. All right. It's not for me.
It's
Surrounding us here.
we wanted to take the time. Tom Nabbe has come to so many of our events over the years. And we decided to start something, a little tradition here at Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. So Tom, we would love to present this to you. You are the first inaugural inductee into the Retro WDW 5 Timers Club.
Oh my God.
Hey!
I'd like to present you this jacket.
Official. This is official. Look at this.
Oh, my God. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Get totally surprised all the time. I had the opportunity in July to be hosted at Disneyland's 70th anniversary in a parade, and now I get a new jacket. So such a deal.
That's a
Thank
crested
you.
jacket there,
Very
too.
welcome.
And we asked your son, so we made sure we got the right size. You want to tell them what the 5 Timers Club
Yeah,
is?
so for the younger viewers out there that may not watch Saturday Night Live, they have a running joke for many years where those that come on the show receive a jacket with the big 5 on it. So we created our own little logo and wanted to start that club ourselves. And yeah, so welcome. You are the first one in.
Thank you. Howie, thank you. We go way back.
I got a hug.
DJ, what a great group.
Yes. So hopefully the jacket is an incentive to the rest of you to come back.
Or more for some of
Thank you, everybody, for this panel. It was wonderful. And they'll stick around over here, so.